Surprise, surprise, the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct is almost here. Yeah, time has absolutely flown by since that initial reveal trailer, but I'm not complaining. I'm obviously extremely excited to see what Nintendo has in store when fully showing off the Switch 2, and also, this low-key needs to be one of the greatest Directs of all time. Not just because we want all the awesome announcements, but because this is the presentation to sell the Switch 2 console. Nintendo hasn't been in this position for a while, that being moving from one really successful console to another. The Switch was obviously a massive success, but that was coming off the Wii U. Nintendo really needs to make their case for Switch 2 because so many people already bought Switch 1. They need reasons to upgrade. This was also one of the longest waits from Direct announcement to reveal. Obviously, keeping it realistic, we'd love for 20 new first-party games to be announced, but we're keeping this as a plausible best and worst case scenario. That's right, we're gonna be fully running through a prediction for the Direct twice. One for the ceiling of how realistically good it could possibly be, and then one for the floor of, this would probably be the worst case scenario, but still realistically what they could actually do. Because this Direct is so important, there's a ton to jump into, so hey guys, it's Thomas from the Switch Shop. Let's just get started. Here are the best and worst case scenarios for the big Switch 2 presentation. We're gonna start off with the plausible best case scenario. The first thing is that the presentation is announced to be 50 minutes, but goes a bit longer at about 55. This is pretty long for a Direct, especially more recent Directs, as Nintendo has gotten pretty efficient at jamming a bunch of things into a relatively short runtime. However, while this is labeled as a Direct and the original Nintendo Switch January presentation was not, functionally these are very similar. They're both going to be announcing a new console, showing off the vast majority of that console's features, and going over a pretty hefty amount of games. That Nintendo Switch presentation I was talking about was about 65-66 minutes, but considering again Nintendo's faster and they don't really need to explain the core concept of the Switch because we already know that, I think 50 to 55 minutes is probably the best case scenario we could get. This is a small thing too, but most all of the big names will appear in this Direct as well. Miyamoto, Koizumi, Sakurai, Aonuma, Furukawa, etc. In the best case scenario, they quickly and efficiently go over how the Switch 2 is a substantial upgrade over the Switch 1. This includes features like Joy-Con HD Rumble 2 or 4K Rumble. Whether that's just an upgraded form of Rumble or something more interesting like physical resistance on the analog sticks, who knows? The Switch 2 will use DLSS and is 4K compatible on the dock. It'll go through quality of life updates like USB-C on the top of the console and confirm that the screen is 1080p handheld. Yes, it would be amazing if the screen was also OLED, but it's going to be LCD. No way Nintendo does that off-rip, even in a best case scenario. These are all great things, but going in, we already know most of this. Luckily, this sort of overview only takes up about 10 minutes of the presentation, with the rest being nothing but banger announcements. Since this console doesn't really have to worry about power like the Switch 1 did, the menu and UI are shown off to have much more personality, with the big kicker being themes. There's only very simple colors and patterns, but for NSO members, they can get game-specific themes with dynamic backgrounds. Folders for games are included, but we also get sneak peeks for additional features, like voice chat in games, parties, and overall improved social features that make NSO a lot more of a valuable offer. Speaking of NSO, in the best case scenario, Nintendo adds DS and GameCube to the expansion pass at no extra charge, while maybe even putting NSO or Game Boy Advance in the base tier for Switch 2. My personal pick is that we'll probably get one new console added to the expansion pass, but best case scenario, we get both DS and GameCube. Mouse functionality is also officially confirmed, with it serving as another way to play, not limiting the games to the controls, but expanding the ways that games can be controlled. A pack-in game by the Switch Sports devs, could be a new Switch Sport Resort or a new IP, will be shown off as well, but it heavily showcases the mouse support and comes as a pack-in title with Switch 2. The console is then announced for May or June, releasing at $399 with a $449 bundle including Mario Kart 9 or 10 or whatever it's called. Speaking of, Mario Kart 9 gets a full reveal with a mind-blowing gameplay mechanic as a hook that is instantly understandable to anyone watching the trailer. Having an instantly visually identifiable gameplay mechanic beyond the addition of 24 racers seems like what Mario Kart needs, because again, most Mario Kart fans are not like the hardcore fans like us. Mario Kart is an extremely casual series. They need something that anyone can see and say, oh yeah, that's a new Mario Kart. Also, the new Mario Kart has a story mode alongside it to serve as both a big single player and multiplayer draw that covers most of Nintendo's more casual bases. I also hope that in this Direct, we get a dedicated Mario Kart 9 Direct announced for a bit later on closer to the console's release. Mario Kart 9 is revealed to be a launch title. Next, a brand new IP will be shown off. Whether it's multiplayer or single player, I don't entirely know, but this will be a blow your socks off type of reveal that a lot of people will be talking about after the Direct. Yes, it can be kind of disappointing to look back on, but back in the way early days of the Switch, ARMS was incredibly hyped up. People thought it would be a next Splatoon. Again, I'm not sure if this new IP will be single player or multiplayer, but that same frenetic excitement of seeing Nintendo try something completely new with a brand new universe and characters, that's the feeling we'll get here with this new IP trailer. Next, we'll see Metroid Prime 4, and it's confirmed to be cross-gen, and it blows us all away as primarily it's a Switch 2 game that has some crazy mechanics. Okay, hear me out. It has been 6 years since they've restarted development, so not only is this one of the most expensive games Nintendo will have ever made, but it's gonna look like it. Considering this game had such a tumultuous development and so many resources have already been poured into it, it will essentially be marketed as two separate games. Of course, all the gameplay will be similar, but the graphical enhancements the Switch 2 version receives will genuinely make it look far, far better than the Switch 1 version. Eiji Aonuma shows up next, and let's talk Zelda. I think we will get something Zelda here. Of course, it could be a tease for the next mainline game, which sounds crazy, except we got a Tears of the Kingdom tease 2 years after Breath of the Wild, and now it's 2 years after Tears of the Kingdom. They also didn't do DLC for Tears of the Kingdom, so it's not out of the question, but I don't think so. Realistically, we're getting a remake of something like Ocarina of Time, something that shows how graphically intense the Switch 2 can get, while also just being a great game in its own right that a lot of people are going to want to play. Next, we're going to take a look at a brand new 3D Donkey Kong game. It's been forever since we've gotten a DK game, and maybe that rumor about the Odyssey team working on one a while ago was real and they've been saving it. Even if that's not real, this is the best case scenario, and for me, the best case scenario is a new Donkey Kong game. It also makes a lot of sense. They intentionally showed off a new redesign for Donkey Kong in the initial Switch 2 reveal trailer. In my opinion, they're going to show off Donkey Kong pretty heavily in this direct just to reinforce that, yeah, this is how Donkey Kong looks now. It seems weird for them to like half do a redesign for one of the most iconic characters in all of gaming. They're doing this is the new Donkey Kong, and they're gonna make it clear that this is how he looks now. Whether they're just showing him as a character in other games or in his brand new game, I'm not entirely sure, but again, this is the best possible scenario. So I'm saying a new game, and I think this new 3D Donkey Kong is going to be a more linear platformer, more similar to something like Kirby and the Forgotten Land than a Mario Odyssey, with local multiplayer like 3D World shown off as well. Next, we'll get either an Animal Crossing or Splatoon game shown off with an early 2026 release. I'm leaning towards Splatoon, and we just did a video talking about everything we'd want to see in a new Splatoon game and why it might be closer than you think, so I won't go too in depth here. Next, we get a moment with Sakurai, and his next game gets shown off. It'll get a release date for this year. It's not Smash Bros, but it'll be something super impressive and exciting. Once again, I also have a video going over why I think a Sakurai game will be in this presentation, so again, if you're interested for more in-depth reasoning as to why, those videos will be linked at the end. Next, let's talk about, well, next level games and what their next game is. Okay, next.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
It has been 3 years since Mario Strikers Battle League, and that game definitely didn't take all that much effort, so they gotta have something cooking. Be it Luigi's Mansion 4 or maybe a Mario baseball game, their next game will be shown off here. Because most Switch 1 games have adaptive resolution, Nintendo will then announce some simple patches. Most Switch 1 games will run better on day one of Switch 2. Games like Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey will be 4K 60 FPS, and maybe Pokemon will actually run at 720p 30 FPS now. Next, we'll see some huge AAA support from third parties that showcases the Switch 2's power. Games like Red Dead Redemption 2, Monster Hunter Wilds, Elden Ring, Final Fantasy VII Remake, and maybe even Cyberpunk, please? I love Cyberpunk. Those games are all coming to Switch 2 and pretty much looking just as good as other consoles. Seeing that Nintendo is in full-blown advertising mode as the console will come out in May or June, which is a couple of months after this presentation, the presentation ends with the Switch 2 getting a great outro trailer, akin to the original Switch announcement or Super Bowl trailer. This showcases some real people using the console, the mouse functionality, and acting as a sizzle reel showcasing new games, some not announced yet, like a new Kirby game. More footage of that Zelda remake is shown off here, and we also get AAA games shown that really showcase the power of Switch 2. But that's not actually the end of the best case scenario Nintendo Direct, because the president of Nintendo pops right back up with Yoshiaki Koizumi at his side to say they have one more thing. A massive open-world 3D Mario that combines the best of Odyssey with the expanse of Bowser's Fury's Lake Lapcat. We get a beefy trailer for this game, and it's announced as the holiday title for 2025. Afterwards, they tell us to tune into a June Direct, which showcases what else is coming in the later half of 2025, and will tease some games for early 2026. That would be the best case scenario, but now let's move on to the worst. Before we move on, I want to ask you guys, let us know down in the comments below what your best and worst case case scenario for this direct is. Seriously, I'm genuinely curious. What do you think is the best thing that could possibly happen, and what is your more like tempered, realistic, kind of pessimistic expectations? I'll be down in the comments below a lot because I'm really interested just to see what you guys have to say. And also, if you're enjoying the video and want a lot more Switch 2 content leading up to and past the presentation, you already know what to do. We're trying to hit 300,000 subscribers before the Switch 2 releases, and it would mean a lot if you helped out by hitting the subscribe button. Alright, let's get back to it. I don't like being negative, but I think it's important to go through what could theoretically be the worst case scenario. Like, they're not just gonna get up there and say nothing, but especially with expectations so high, there's a pretty decent chance that this direct is at least disappointing to some people. So I'd like to throw my hat in the ring at what a worst case scenario could look like here, but again, it's still gonna be an actual direct that they could do. And starting off with details about the direct, it's barely 30 minutes. We've gotten amazing directs before that were around 30 minutes. In fact, E3 from 2017 was an incredible showcase that announced Prime 4, Kirby Star Allies, Yoshi's Crafted World, and showed off a bunch of games as well, like that excellent Jump Up Superstar trailer for Mario Odyssey. All of this is to say that you can have a good direct in a shorter time frame, but especially considering so much of this direct is probably not going to be about the games themselves, but also about the console, 30 minutes is just too short here. The direct includes vague specs talk, mainly mentioning the cosmetic adjustments to the Switch and the Joy-Con, and doesn't even confirm DLSS, 4K compatibility, or anything like that. The console is announced to release in late 2025. Due to ongoing economic situations, we're looking at $4.99 USD with no pack-in game here. Moving over to Nintendo Switch Online, it gets a few cosmetic additions, but nothing substantial game-wise. The price may not go up, but it's pretty much a nothing burger for Nintendo Switch Online. There is a tech demo-like game that is releasing day one that shows off mouse controls, but it's mouse controls exclusive and looks kind of like a boring 1-2 Switch instead of a Wii Sports or Nintendo Land-esque game. Alright, now it's finally time to learn about the game that will most likely be the best-selling game on the Switch 2. We've been waiting for a new Mario Kart for so long. Technically, it's been since 2014, and Nintendo finally shows it off with... Yeah, okay. The worst case scenario for Mario Kart is just a glorified announcement for a dedicated Mario Kart 9 Direct, announced for like July or something, but nothing actually about the game besides the same footage we already saw in the Switch 2 teaser. Miyamoto or Koizumi pop up and mention how it's been 8 years since Odyssey, which hypes us up for the next big 3D Mario reveal, but all they show is the vaguest of teaser images of the next mainline game with a holiday 2026 release window. I will cry if this happens. That would suck. Next up, we get a Breath of the Wild remaster for $60. Since $70 is going to be the new norm here, $60 are now the budget titles. It would look great, but this squashes the hope that a lot of Switch games will naturally look better due to their adaptive resolutions, as well as any sort of Ocarina of Time remake being announced. Breath of the Wild remaster is the only Zelda news we get in this bad presentation. We get a couple of more niche Nintendo series, like specifically Fire Emblem. Sorry to the Fire Emblem fans, I personally am not a big Fire Emblem fan, so I'm sorry to put y'all on the bad presentation, but I'm specifically doing that because the trailer for this game will take way too long. It'll just be one of those things where everyone's like, okay, let's move on. And even though Fire Emblem is a pretty well-acclaimed series within its fandom, seeing something that is undoubtedly still a niche series being shown off as one of the big Switch 2 year one hitters would be undoubtedly a little disappointing. Metroid Prime 4 is still a Switch 1 exclusive game, with no mention of a performance enhancement for Switch 2. There is third-party AAA support, but the announcements are lackluster. A few early PS4/Xbox One ports, but they really just don't look as good as they do on the other consoles. This would effectively solidify that, yeah, we're still a full generation behind. We're getting base PS4, base Xbox One level graphics and performance, and therefore level games. We're not getting, PS5 or Xbox Series level games, or even PS4 Pro. Then, considering in this worst realistic timeline, the Switch 2 will be releasing way later in 2025, we get an announcement of a June Direct, which will have most of the real Switch 2 games being showcased, so we need to wait another 2 months for the actual big reveals. Even though this is the worst Direct, you can't forget about one more thing. It's ARMS 2, or I don't know, something that people are just not interested in. So there you have it, the best and worst Directs we could possibly see. I'm pretty confident this presentation will lean more in the best case than worst case scenario, because the past year or two, although with some great games, have been filled with a lot of smaller titles and lesser important Nintendo studios releasing games. It really does feel like Nintendo has been holding some stuff back for this moment, which does make sense, because obviously they're announcing a new console. They need to really hit the ball out of the park mark here. Be sure to subscribe if you're as excited as we are, as we have so much more content coming up leading to and after the showcase. Also, what games do you want to see in the Direct? What is your best and worst case scenario? Let us know down in the comments below. With that out of the way, I'm Thomas from the Switch Stop signing off. Peace.